Welcome everybody to another great episode of the Beyond Normal podcast. I have a very special guest today. She is a creative. I like to think of her as a creative, but she's doing a lot of work in the DEI space. She's actually helping other speakers out there get engagements. She's working on a lot, but I definitely want to bring her to the stage. Her name is Madi Butler. She is the founder and the brand of the blue-haired unicorn. You heard me correctly. We got that logo in the top right. But before I let you guys know a little bit more about her background, let's bring Madi to the stage. How's it going, Madi?
It's going. How are you?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you for being on the platform. You have a lot going on in your world. And I've been following your content for some time now across different social media networks. Twitter led me to LinkedIn, led me to your Patreon. And you are really the founder of your own brand, which is somewhat different than the founders that we've had on in the past. Your confidence exudes at all times. And so my first question for you is, have you always been this confident?
Oh God, no. No. And honestly, one of the things I say is like, when people ask me this question, it's like, okay, how did you get like this? The real like happy answer or not happy answer is honestly trauma, the same way most of us get to any place in life. And for me, it was a little bit of a darker journey. So in my early 20s, I dated someone who, I think we've all had the experience of dating someone who wasn't good for us. But this person was really bad for me, like bad for me physically, emotionally, financially. And we were in a really abusive relationship. And he was just like your run-of-the-mill, everyday, hardcore, Trump-supporting racist. Fast forward to our breakup. I basically leave everything I own in Houston, Texas, take my 2 dogs and enough stuff to get back to the Northeast. Fast forward again, our whole breakup makes BuzzFeed. And for me, my whole life as a chick who's biracial, I tried everything in my power to lean into everything except being Black. I tried my damnedest to have the straightest hair and look like I constantly stepped out of a banana republic. And so I did all of these things to make myself everything but who I was. But when we made BuzzFeed, the only thing people noticed about me was that I was a Black woman. And so I had this very public reckoning that caused me and forced me to unpack a lot of really harmful behaviors, a lot of internalized Blackness, a lot of internalized hate, and really start thinking about what it meant to show up. And so that was just a promise I had made myself moving forward. I was never going to compromise my identity, my safety, my mind for certainly not a man or anyone else, my friends, my family. And then a couple of years later, it really took me to this place of, oh God, why am I not doing this at work when work is just an extension of who I am and just another relationship in my life? So no, I have not always been confident. It has definitely been a road and a journey to get to this blue-haired place.
I appreciate you being that transparent on our platform. As I was thinking through your content, I think in emojis a lot of times, like what emoji is this person giving off? And when I think of you, I think of that 100 emoji, right? You're keeping it so authentic in this moment. And like you said, nobody's perfect. We all don't enter this world knowing our purpose all the time. But as we have these sometimes traumatic experiences, like you alluded to, we find ourselves. And it's amazing seeing you really be that 100 emoji in this current world where there's so much being thrown at us. People are really out here struggling to be themselves in these current times.
It's hard. I mean, for me, you grow up, at least for me, I grew up with a white mom and a Black dad. And I want to be like very clear, like my whole life, they were like, you're Black. Please figure that out at some point. And for me, I went to schools where everything that looked like success was white. Every moniker in my life was white. So why would I not aspire to be those things? And so I spent a lot of time folding myself into boxes that were never meant for me. And then I went to business school, which is not only super white, but super male dominated. And so I certainly didn't fit in. And then you go through life with this. I sound like this. I know I sound like a Muppet. I have a very like unique voice. It's definitely a voice that like when you hear it, you know it's me. But growing up, people will be like, oh my God, you sound so white. And I remember smiling and thinking that was a compliment because I had learned up until this point that success looked white and sounded white and was white. And so for me, it took me a long time to get to a headspace where that wasn't the goal, that wasn't the beacon. And to be fair, when you look at media or you look at TV and movies and books, oftentimes that's how it's painted. The boss is a straight white man. The head of the household, straight white man. And it's really hard to unlearn those things, especially I think if you ask most people when they had their first Black educator or professor, a lot of us get to say never. And that is scary and terrifying and frankly why representation matters so much.
You're touching on a lot. You're definitely touching on a lot there. You're hitting a nerve with me, Madi. Some of those questions that we're asking ourselves now, like why do we not see educators and just different people in different industries that look like us? And there is kind of like a blanket whiteness that we know is the American way a lot of times. But I'm excited to have people like yourself in this space who are courageous enough to really say the bold things that need to be said, that people aren't always going to agree with. And I'm curious for you, when it comes to the space that you're in now, which is, I think a lot of people would label it as DEI. How has it shocked you a little bit how people are coming to you now in this very moment and they're asking for your input because they're curious, maybe they want some knowledge, but give us a little insight on how that experience has been for you in this DEI space where it seems like a lot of people are at your door asking you to engage.
So I think the DEI space is a really interesting space to live in and navigate. I do think there was a lot of bad actors. If we look at White Fragility that came out, oh God, that was the book everyone was reading in 2020. There are a lot of people who claim to be DEI practitioners and they just go and regurgitate things they learned on Google, and they're white women who then pay or charge 3 times what I charge. And so for me, it's really interesting when people come to me because there's 2 sects of people. There are the people who genuinely want to be better and do better. And then there are people who come to me for education, but it's definitely actually shade. So right before we got on this call, I got a really, really long DM. And the person, every other word out of their DM was the Blacks. And so I can tell when people come to me genuinely wanting education or genuinely wanting to be better, do better, see, the gaps within themselves. But you have a certain group of people who do it to cause harm. And that for me is really an interesting turn that I've seen since 2020, is that people are so much more comfortable being intentional and vocal with the harm that they're willing to cause. And it almost feels like, for me, because I am the classic cynic, I do believe we'll see things get uglier before we get better because of that.
That's a fair point. That is a good segue to my next question for you, because you create a lot of content, and when we put content out there on a lot of social media networks, we always see kind of the likes and the things like that. But you get quite a bit of critics that engage in your content. Some people call them haters, some people call them critics. But I'm curious, because it seems like you're able to take these interactions and actually use them for your brand. So can you talk a little bit about your experience with the critics and how you're taking that content on some of your social media platforms and leveraging it to continue the conversation?
For sure. So I think I want to say I have like degrees, like maybe some are critics and maybe some are haters, and then maybe some of them are actually dangerous people. So in 2020, I actually had someone show up at my front door because they didn't like my content, which seems a little bit of a drastic move. But for me, if you are comfortable harassing a Black woman that you don't know on the internet, publicly, on LinkedIn, where I can see your boss, that tells me a lot about how you most likely interact with the people you work with. If you're comfortable bullying me, a stranger on the internet, you're comfortable bullying that woman over Slack or that queer person in a meeting or not hiring that Black person in an interview. And so if you come to my page and you want the attention so very badly, I'm going to give it to you, because at the end of the day, this actually isn't an individual thing. And people always ask me why I, on LinkedIn at least, take people's names out. And that's because this person is actually just a representative of a much larger group of people. It is not about Joe Bob. It is about the fact that there are people like Joe Bob everywhere, in every company. In every tech company, there is a person like this person. And so if I can get every manager to think differently about how their teams interact or the things that their teams say, or that moment where you had someone say something that gave you a little bit of an alarm bell, but you chose to ignore it, then I feel like I've done my job. Because at the end of the day, these people exist in every crevice of society, and they have decided to come out in all of their loud, terrible, harmful opinions, have decided that suddenly they're comfortable saying them. And if they're comfortable saying them, they should be comfortable with me repeating them to further educate others.
You're dropping gems there, Madi. Like you said, there's a repercussion with some of the things that you say in the world. I really think you're holding people accountable. I want to dig a little bit deeper though, because the comments that you get, some of them are what we would say like very, very bad, very evil. So I'm curious, like how do you go about protecting yourself somewhat in these situations when it comes to like your mental and things like that, when people are just throwing these sharp objects at you, if we can call them that?
Yeah, so I think, for me, it's a little bit different because I lived with someone who I feel like was the world's greatest troll for a very long time. And so for me to take anything something someone on the internet says seriously is hard for me, because I lived with someone who did that to me every day, who changed how I looked at myself, how I thought about myself, how I looked at myself in the mirror even. It made me see myself completely differently. It is wild what our minds can do. And so for me, it is very hard to take things strangers on the internet say to heart, because at the end of the day, I also know that if you are comfortable harassing a stranger online, you've got other stuff going on. And I am empathetic to that, because at the end of the day, I have a wonderful life and people who love me. And I've gotten to this place of healing where I feel really good. And so for me, I do empathize with someone who feels that way, but it is also hard to take them seriously. The only time I really take things seriously on that platform and in my comments is when it comes to my physical health. And there have been a couple of times where it's definitely been a little like iffy, again, like with someone showing up to my house. Those are the times that, again, it's just a little bewildering. But I often think of like, okay, then if not me, then who? And so I have a ton of privilege in being able to talk and say the things that I say, and that comes with risk. But if I can change, again, anyone's life for the better, specifically for Black women, specifically for Black queer women and people, then for me, the risk is worth it, because at the end of the day, they aren't always safe to say the things that I say. And so I'm happy to take that risk.
That is a really heavy lift to bear. But I appreciate you taking on that challenge. But I'm curious, because a lot of the interactions that people have with you, we see the blue-haired unicorn logo, right? You try to message things through that channel. So I'm curious, like, is there any difference you see right now between Madi Butler and the blue-haired unicorn?
Kind of, not necessarily me. So like when I think of myself in emojis, I think of myself as like the little snarky nail paint emoji, like the one that's like because I very much feel that's like my aura. But it's funny because I think a lot of people meet me, and for those who don't know, I do have a day job. I'm the VP of people at Grav. And so I think initially when people met me, they thought I was going to just be like this snarky asshole all the time, and that I was constantly going to challenge the things that they say. But I also know as a leader, fundamentally, that doesn't serve me. And so there are differences in the way that I lead from an organizational perspective versus the way I educate outside of my organization. And so that's a little different. And then I guess if you think about me as like just a regular human, I'm like actually really awkward and I'm really uncomfortable in social settings, which is ironic because I get up on stages and talk and keynote all the time. But like, please don't ask me to network or work a room. I am like much happier in small groups of people. So I guess that part's a little different, though I am like kind of snarky in real life, in my personal life, I suppose.
That's your personality. Like you said, you're living your true self. And so checking the box to be a certain type of way, I think in the work that you're doing, it's pretty hard for somebody to actually put you in a box. You wouldn't be doing the work you're doing if somebody could check the box and say, Maddie does these things by the book.
Got to keep them on their toes.
Yeah, you got to keep them on their toes. I love that. So your work that you're doing, you have a day job, you have the blue-haired unicorn. But I think one of the projects that I'm excited about, we actually had Jonathan Dumas. He's in the organizational kind of DEI space as well. He mentioned using the Black Speaker Collective platform and getting speaking gigs and opportunities through that platform. How did you, like, one, have the idea for that and then like execute on it to where you're not one of the only people now who is having who is the spokesperson for having these DEI conversations?
So I think what really sparked me to start Black Speakers Collection was an accident, which is like most things I do are an accident. Like when people ask me how I built my brand, accident. The way I execute it is because I have ADHD and my hyper focus is always on 100 if I have an idea. But it really sparked from, I was thinking probably mid-December, around how mid-December people were starting to roll in to message me about Black History Month, those who hadn't already booked me. And I knew they would roll in until like January 30th. And it blows my mind because Black History Month happens at the same time every year. It's not like Thanksgiving or Easter where it's different every year. It is the same thing. And to pair that off, I thought about how often Black speakers only get booked during Black History Month, as if we don't speak on other things. And so I had made a LinkedIn post basically saying that, like, if you're going to book your Black History Month speakers, book them in a year in advance, because you know it happens every year. If you book me this close, my price has gone up, or I don't have time. And I want to talk to people and hear from people who don't just speak about racial trauma and racial justice and DEI. I want to hear from people who speak about AI and engineering and people and culture and traveling solo. And we can talk about every single thing. We are so multifaceted and so talented and so brilliant. And so I encourage people to drop their topics, drop their emails and their websites if they had one. At the end, I was like, oh gosh, that's a lot of really good data that I shouldn't let die in my comment section. And so me, being the grandmother that I am, put it in an Excel spreadsheet because that's all I know. And someone messaged me and they were like, please let me help you. And so they were like, give me 20 minutes and I'll convert it to something different. And so 20 minutes later, I had a full website with a page where you could sign up. So I wasn't inputting stuff in an Excel spreadsheet. And I was like pumped. We had 28 like speakers. And I thought that was like slamming. Great. Really proud of myself in that moment. And that was December 25th. And by like January 5th, we had 1,000. And I was like, okay, whew, like, what did we do? And now we're, at the tail end of April and we're almost at 3,000. We've had a couple of different workshops internally. We have a Slack channel with over 500 people. We are launching our first speaker series in July, which is called Black Excellence, which will really kind of be a TEDx style speaker series where they can pick their topic and their time length. But it's been really cool to watch speakers get booked. I had 2 speakers today who had an event together and they both messaged me after to say how amazing it was to be compensated for talking about the things that they would normally talk about anyway. And I think that is the thing for me is speaking, like salary, we've been really hush hush about what we make and how we make it, because we've been taught to feel bad about making money. And honestly, $500 is a lot of money. So when people used to reach out to me to say, do you want to speak for $500? I'd be like, oh my God, yeah, like perfect. And it took someone else telling me, every time that you get underpaid, you basically set up another Black woman to be underpaid. And then I was horrified from there on out. And I was like, well, no, now I have to go get my bag, because I need them to get their bag. And so this provided an opportunity to talk out loud about what we're making and what I should expect to make and how I can market myself, not only to benefit me and my bag, but so that the person comes after me gets their bag too. And so it's been really, really exciting to launch this and have a planning committee and just do all of the things that I never really expected. Because when I first started speaking, it felt like a very lonely place, because it felt like everyone was your competition. Like, you don't want to talk about what you talk about, because what if they steal what I talk about? When in actuality, there's room for all of us to not only get our bag, but get on our stages and talk about a collective of different things. And for me, that's been the most exciting part, is to watch other people get their bag, because I know I get booked a lot because I have a big following that boosts my credibility. People know who I am. People have heard me speak in other places, so they book me. However, I am not under the impression that I am the smartest, funniest, snarkiest, blue-haired unicorn out there. And so I want other people to get booked, even if they don't have a personal brand. You shouldn't have to have a personal brand to be considered an expert in what you do. And so if I can use my personal brand to help elevate other people and get them out and get them booked and get them paid, then I'm happy to do it.
Watching the other people get the bag. That is in this world we live in right now, where I think the media kind of portrays this like me attitude. That's refreshing, and definitely beyond normal, I would say, Maddie. So I appreciate you putting that energy in there. I've talked to quite a few people that have signed up for the platform and actually gotten gigs. Jonathan was just the one that we had on the platform. So I'm excited to see the growth. I'm pretty sure you're close to, if not over 2,500 speakers. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're almost 3,000 now.
Exactly. So I'm curious, when you have these wonderful companies come into fruition by accident, like, how do you go about setting, like, what's that North Star? Like, how do you know you're doing the job you intended to do when something is started just off of a whim, just off of a conversation?
So I think for me, it's seeing people get paid. And so when I scroll through, so I use Airtable now, I've moved from Excel to an Airtable. Everyone should be proud. I can tally up everyone's rates. And so when you look at the rates of everyone combined, we're like over $10 million in run rates for 60 minutes. That is bananas to me. And so if I think about how I can use my little piece of the world to close the wealth gap, even if it's by this much, then I feel like I've done my job. Because at the end of the day, we deserve to get paid, and not in exposure or in like, don't you just want to say you spoke at Google or whatever it is. And for me, that is what makes me feel like I've done the work, is watching people get paid and get paid amounts of money that they never imagined they would get paid to speak.
That's awesome. Get the bag. There's just so much room, so much opportunity for all of us to win in this current environment. And so you setting that up to where we grow together. I'm excited to see how many speakers one day you have on the platform. I'm pretty sure it's going to be well beyond what it is now.
We can hope.
Yeah. Nah, I like it. I like it. So I want to go back to you mentioning you being kind of quirky, and you just, you have your way of doing things that you may say is not necessarily conforming or checking the box off of what people would think when they see some of your content. And so how do you think your personality has helped you as a founder of a business, a founder of a brand, elevate? Like what are some of those strengths that you relied on to get to this point where you're at now, where it seems like you're thriving?
So I think for me, it's honestly my biggest skill set is my ability to be transparent about basically everything. I'm a really big advocate of the absolute need to be human at work. And I think as a leader, it gets my people to trust me because I am honest about the things that I am going through, the things that I am feeling, the things that I am experiencing. I am never going to be that manager that puts on a good face. Just for the sake of putting on a good face. I am never going to be that manager that doesn't take PTO. Like, you ain't got to worry about me. I am taking my PTO. And so I feel the same as a founder and as an entrepreneur. I take that transparency into my education, into the stages I speak on, because at the end of the day, what we're doing is human work. None of this works if humans don't. And so for me, I think my power and ability to connect with myself as a human allows me to connect with others fairly easily.
I would say for you, that is that's your superpower. Like, you are amazing at that. Like, it's scary how good at that you are. As I've seen your content and then have engaged more with you. So on the flip side of that, though, what's an area where you got to spend a little bit more time wearing that founder hat that you may not feel comfortable with, or you just may not have that experience in the past dealing with?
Honestly, I think for me, it's harnessing like tasks and to-dos. That's where I really struggle. Is I will like be typing an email and I'll be like, oh God, I had to do that thing. And so I'll like be halfway through that email, go to another tab, go start that thing and be like, oh God, I got to do that thing. And then 12 tabs later, I'm halfway through like a bunch of things. And so being able to really dial in and focus on like tasks and to-dos is definitely where I struggle. And part of that is because at heart, I'm a creative. And so structure has never been like my strong point. Fun fact, I like got into a military college out of high school and like I literally can't imagine it now. But when you get in, they like make you go for 2 nights to see how you like it. I lasted like 6 whole hours before I made my mom come get me. I was like, this is horrible. They're making me walk in a line. I'm getting yelled at a lot. Please come get me. And that's really carried over to me into adulthood. I don't love structure. I like to kind of just like free float through things. It's very much in my nature to wing it. So for me, it's really like dialing in on tasks and sometimes creating some structure for myself to get stuff done.
Well, that definitely makes sense. I'm curious, like you mentioned the tab. So are you a multitasker, or do you just focus on that one thing and the other stuff doesn't matter?
So it depends on the day. So like for me, sometimes when I ADHD hyper focus, I could like focus on one task for 8 hours. So when I was like writing my book proposal, I literally checked myself into a hotel and hyper focused for 8 hours and like wrote literally every chapter summary in a sitting with like a coffee. Majority of the time, I'm very much a multitasker, which could be a great thing, could be a bad thing. Depends on what seminar you go to. Some seminars say no one can be a multitasker and others say you have to be. So I don't know. I'm winging it. But I 100% have 85 tabs open every time. Every time I share my screen at work, I'm like, please don't be upset about all my tabs. I can't delete them though because I need them.
Yeah, I'd be the person, if we were on a Zoom call, I'd be the person like, can I have control of your mouse so I can delete all these tabs that you have open? Oh, that drives me crazy. So, all right, you just mentioned your book that you're working on. So tell folks, like what's next for the Blue Hair Unicorn, for Madi, and how they can stay engaged with the brand moving forward.
Yeah, so I'm writing a book, which is centered on what it means to find your voice, live in it, step into it, and honestly being honest about the consequences that do come with that and the positives that come with that. It is an absolute roller coaster that is worth it. For me, learning that not everyone has to like you, not everyone will like you, has been the most painful and most powerful lesson. So that is really what's exciting and what's next for me outside of doing the Black speaker stuff. We do have our first speaker series in July. Applications are open. You have to be Black and a speaker. But otherwise, applications are open. And then if you want to stay in touch with me, you can always find me on LinkedIn under Madison Butler. It does come up as Blue Haired Unicorn as well. Or you can find me on Twitter, which is Corporate Unicorn.
That's dope. I just want to say thank you for coming on the platform, the community that you're building, from the Blue Hair Unicorn to the Black Speaker Collective. I know you're involved in a bunch of other different organizations. It's amazing to watch. I'm excited that I get to watch the movie play out. And so, one last time I want to pass it to you. What do you want to leave our listeners with, that lasting thought as we close out the conversation?
I think the hardest part about work, about being a founder, is there are always going to be people who tell you you're not good enough. The way you do things isn't good enough. Just change it. Change the way you educate. Change the way you talk. Change the way you dress. Don't be so loud. Don't listen to them. You are good enough at all times, every moment of every day, even on your worst day. You are good at 100. Whatever 100 is to you, not to them.
That's a mic drop moment. I'm not even going to say anything else, Maddie. Again, appreciate you for coming on the platform. And thanks for the listeners for tuning in to another great episode of the Beyond Normal podcast.